Hi there, I'm Watchin, founder and CEO of I Choose the Ladder, and I want to welcome you to the C-Suite Cheat Code, a show where we pull the curtain back on the unwritten rules of corporate America, and we give out the cheat codes to reconstructing the corporate ladder. First item on our meeting agenda, retaining high potential talent. Then we'll have a conversation about how to prepare for your performance review. And before we end our meeting, we will head on over to the hot seat where I will answer your questions. Clearly, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get to it. If you have been present anywhere in these United States of America in the last 12 months, you have heard the phrase, the Great Resignation. And what the Great Resignation refers to is the number of people who are choosing to leave their jobs to pursue other opportunities. And there are industries that are hit a lot harder than others, but overall, there are a ton of people who are deciding if corporate America and if working for somebody else is a choice that they want to make. And understandably so, leaders are freaking out. People are concerned about how do you retain the talent that you want in an environment that has become increasingly more competitive for high potential and high performing talent. So if you are a leader of an organization who is looking to attract talent, but also retain the talent that you do have, you know that getting new people in your organization can be extremely expensive. And so it is important to make sure that while you are working to attract new talent, you are doing your absolute best to hold on to the high potential and high performing talent that you already have. So let's talk about some ways that you can do that. What you want to focus on is the development of all talent, right? I think some of what I've seen with the companies that we work with is that there's a special emphasis that's put on the people that you have identified as leaders, and those folks get all the development, they get all the resources, but there's still a population of people who work for you who may have potential, but may need a little bit extra mentorship or a little bit extra help or a little bit extra development. And I would say that you should allocate resources to those people to see if they actually do rise to the occasion and reach the potential that you saw in them when you hired them. So it's not only your high performing talent that needs you right now, it's your entire workforce and the folks who have potential to be high performing, but may need a little extra TLC from their leaders. The next thing is you want to be intentional about the voices that you are having at the table and the voices who get to weigh in on the decisions that you make as an organization. One of the main reasons that people are leaving, if you look at the data, especially Black people and people of color, is that they don't feel seen or valued. They feel like they are in the organizations to check a box. You can hit your diversity quota or whatever unshared metric that you may have as it pertains to, people of color or Black folks, but you don't really want them there. And so for you as a leader, it's important to make sure that if you have people who you have hired who all of a sudden have retreated, right? They're no longer engaged as much as they used to be. You should be intentional about creating opportunities to bring them into the fold, to bring them into the conversation, to let them know that you do appreciate them and you do value their contributions, because if people don't feel valued, they will find other places that may value them more. Especially if they've been working a ton, they've been giving a ton, and they just don't feel like they are being recognized for their work in ways that are meaningful to them, you could be at risk for losing your talent. The third thing that I would say is that you should be asking a ton of questions right now of your employees if you are a people manager or if you are a market leader. You want to make sure that you are getting from them, you are getting firsthand information on what they actually need right now. What does support look like for them right now? What does being valued looks like for them right now? You need to be having constant conversations with the people who work for you so that you can be sure that the solutions that you are creating for your organization and for your team are actually the ones that are going to be helpful in keeping people. One of the big, I think, misconceptions is that salary or compensation is the only thing that matters. So if you pay people a lot of money, they will stay. And what we're seeing is that is not necessarily true. And don't get me wrong, compensation matters, so you should be paying people very, very well. However, there are other things that people are considering as they decide if a corporation is the right fit for them. Things like flexibility, things like being able to innovate, things like autonomy, things like passion about the work, things like being connected to their colleagues. There are a ton of things that carry weight, But if you don't ask the questions, you're not going to know, and you're going to spend a lot of dollars doing things that may not be received in the ways that you had hoped, and your retention numbers will still begin to decline. I would say retention, as you think about it right now, and how you can be an organization that not only gets the talent that are leaving organizations who are not prioritizing them, but being an organization that that people look to as a model, is that you want to be a place where transparency is the norm. And while I understand that as a leader, you may not be able to share everything, but if people understand what's happening as best as they can, they feel more secure in those environments, right? It doesn't feel like nobody knows what's going on. It doesn't feel like everybody's, at risk of leaving. And so they might also want to maybe protect themselves and leave as well. The more transparent and open you are with your employees, and the more they will feel comfortable and confident that there is a plan moving forward. And as things change, keep them updated. But a culture of transparency and transparent leadership is one of the best ways that you can get people to trust you and trust your leadership as we navigate some pretty strange times. And now we are going to head to my favorite place in the world, the internet. In today's As Seen on the Internet, there is a Medium article by a woman named Whitney Smart. And the title of the article is, "Dear HR Managers, please stop asking me why I left my last position. You don't really want to know." And when I saw this, I thought about how we coach people to answer this question when it's asked in interviews. But her article made me think about, why are we even asking that question? What piece of data or pieces of data are we hoping to get from the answer in order to make a decision? And would we be better off, or may there possibly be a better way to ask the question to get data that is actually useful in deciding if a candidate is actually a good fit for your organization? Because here's the truth of the matter. If you ask someone why they left their last position, if it's because their manager was a horrible person, they're not going to say that, right? Because they will be perceived as being, negative, or being someone who's a complainer, or all those things, right? So you're not going to get the kind of information that you want to get. And so if you are a hiring manager or someone who does interviews, ask yourself, what data are you trying to get when you ask someone why they left their last job? And then figure out if there's a better way to ask that question that can still get you a more honest answer and get you the data that you actually want about that candidate. In today's cheat code, you all get to hear from me as I talk about and hopefully prepare you, regardless of if you are a people manager or an individual contributor, to better maximize your performance reviews. We know that companies put a lot of weight and a lot of stock into performance reviews. However, it seems that we only focus on them during the conversations. Everybody forgets about them once we've found out what our raise is or is not. And then we repeat the same cycle over and over. And so if you are giving a performance review this year, or if you are receiving a performance review this year, make sure that you grab your I Choose the Ladder notebook, a pen, and your favorite beverage, because I'm going to give you the cheat code on how to maximize your next performance review.
I know performance review season is slowly creeping up on us, and nobody enjoys performance review seasons. Managers don't enjoy it because they don't want to fill out all the forms and have to remember while still doing their jobs. And then employees don't like it because they walk into meetings and they feel like it's a one-way conversation where their managers are trying to remember what their staff did all year. And then based on some formula that they don't understand, the managers or the employees, they're given information, a lot of times information that is less than what they expected. And so I want to give us a few tools to go into from the manager's perspective as you start thinking about your performance review conversations. So first, let's just put this out on the table. People are overworked, right? And so most of your employees, if they have not already been given some kind of acknowledgement or reward for the work that they've put in the last 18 months, when you have been short-staffed, when you have been in really tumultuous times with lots of changes, lots of pivoting, and really demanding a lot of your employees, a lot of them are going to come into performance review season expecting to have conversations that either lead to a lot more salary, right, to compensate for the extra work that they've done and will probably continue to do, a promotion of some sort, right? Like, so now that I've been working at the director level because you got rid of the director, I'm expecting to be promoted into that role. And if those kinds of asks are not met, right, you could have real big retention problems on your hand, because people do not want to work in spaces where they don't feel seen, valued, or appreciated, right? And so performance review is it's an opportunity for you to, one, reward your employees who have literally held companies down for the last 18 months, but also paint the picture for what their next level of progression could look like with your organization. We talked about this last week. If employees cannot see a clear path to where they want to be within your organization, they will leave. And right now, as it pertains to Black women talent, right, there's a desire, there's a demand for high performing Black talent. We all know that. We might not want to say it out loud, right? Because of the different pressures that corporations are facing. And so it is a competitive market for the employees that you're trying to retain. So you should keep that in mind as you head into performance review season. And so there are a couple of things, or a few things, I would say like 5 or 6 questions that you as a people manager should be preparing to answer as you go into conversations with your staff, especially if you are not in the position to compensate them in a way that is going to be reflective of the value that they've given to your organization in the last 18 months. The first thing I would say is to avoid is the guilt trip. We had to lay off so many people, we kept you, right? That is actually insulting to the people who stayed and picked up the work and the slack of all the people who were laid off, right? And like, they are well aware that you all laid people off. It was a lot of those people were their colleagues, they were their friends. And so that was a painful time for everyone involved. But then on top of that, they also then had to pick up a lot of extra work in order to make sure that your companies and your departments still operated at optimum levels, right? And so they are aware. So you don't need to remind your staff about the condition that COVID has caused on organizations. Nobody knows that more than the employees who are left within the walls of your organization, who were left to kind of pick up the pieces along with you. But again, you are their manager. And so as someone who's in a leadership role, your job is to make sure that your staff feels valued, feels appreciated, and feels seen, right? So one of the questions that you should be able to answer is, how is your staff, the specific person, how is their success being measured? And this is really important because you don't want your staff to burn out. And if there's not clarity around how you are measuring their success for the next 12 months, or how you were measuring their success in the past, if there was no conversation about it, you're going to have a bunch of staff saying yes to a bunch of things that they think will prove their value and their worth. But if those things don't really matter in the grand scheme of how you are evaluating them, they're going to burn out. They're going to get to their review next year, and they will be extremely resentful because they've done a lot of work. They've done a lot of stuff. They felt like they were doing all the right things because there was no clarity around how success for their specific role was being evaluated. Also, what success at this level needs to look like in order to be considered for a promotion or for a raise. Those things go hand in hand and are the most important things that I think parts of the conversation, because clarity around that will make your year a lot smoother. The second thing to think about is, and I didn't make this up, right? So data says that as a manager, you're probably only remembering the last 3 months of what that specific employee contributed. That's right, Joy, if they stick around for the next year's review, because I think COVID has caused people to reevaluate where they want to be spending their time, how they want to be spending their time. We talked about it last week, how women are leaving the workplace because for a lot of them who are caregivers, right, there's a lot of uncertainty still because of COVID. And so they can't necessarily be in organizations that are not flexible, but they obviously can't be in organizations where they don't feel seen or appreciated or valued, because they're giving up so much on the flip side in order to be in those positions. The second thing that, what was I saying? Okay, I'll go to this next thing and then I'll circle back. So in order for people to understand where it is that they're going, there has to be clarity, and people who don't see themselves clearly walking down paths of an organization don't tend to stay. And that does not mean that in their review, you have to promote someone every single year, but you do have to be clear around where they are and where they want to go, what needs to happen. So with that is, you also need to be able to identify growth opportunities for them. I was talking about how people only tend to remember the last 3 months of an employee's contributions, right? And as a manager, you manage everybody else's on your team's career, and then you also manage your own. So as you're thinking about evaluating others, you're also thinking about how you're going to be evaluated, which is a tough spot to be in. But again, that is one of the responsibilities of leadership, right? But for your employees, if you have not been checking in regularly, and I'm not talking about your one-on-ones, but checking in to make sure that the targets that you set have not changed, or that there's not new information that employee needs to know in order to be able to get what they're expecting to get at the end of the year, you could run into problems, right? One of the things that we hear about all the time is around moving targets, where you tell someone, this is what you need to be successful. They check all those boxes, and then they come back to you expecting the result that was discussed. And it's like, oh, but then you also have to add this. And oh, I forgot about this. And oh, now this has changed. And so quarterly, you should be meeting with your team to talk about the priorities. If there are things that have changed or things that they need to understand that is new to the conversation that was not discussed the last time that you talked about whether it was their promotion, their raise, and what it would take to get that. Moving targets are one of the fastest way to get people to not trust you, to break your employee trust. And if people don't trust you, then they tend to not like you anymore. And people tend to work harder for people that they like because they feel like those people actually care about them. And I say this all the time, being liked is not necessarily like the end all and be all. Like being respected, I think, is more important. But people do work harder for people and managers that they like. And so make sure that if things are changing, you are being transparent and communicating with your staff and with your team those changes so that they know how they can adjust to still meet the metrics that they've set for themselves. The next thing I said was growth opportunities. So have at least 3 growth opportunities that people can work towards, right? And those growth opportunities should be tied to where they want to go next or what that goal is. So if it's more of a salary, right? Are there competencies that are tied that the person needs to be able to display in order for you to advocate for them to get more money? If it's a job title, right? Is there something that they need to prove in, like, are there skills that have to be better? Like, do they need to be better presenters? And these need to be concrete things, right? They can't just be like, you need to get better. You need to get better can mean a ton of things. And we've talked about this in the past, especially as it pertains to employers and managers who are giving feedback to Black staff, where there's a little bit of a hesitation to say the truth because you're afraid that you will come across as mean or picking on them or whatever the reason, the rationale is. Tangible feedback is what gives people the ability to grow within your organization. How you say things is something that you can work on. But if there's something that needs to be said in terms of development for your staff, it is your job as their manager or as their leader to communicate those things in a way that they can understand and then act upon. And if they want to be in thought partnership with you around what that action looks like, I would hope that if you're trying to retain them, that you would be open to those conversations. Performance review season is stressful for everyone, right? So if you are someone who is getting reviewed, I know as you start to put all of your documents together, if you have the review planner, you already have your documents, but for everybody else, putting all your documents together, your performance receipts, right? So we say plan, perform, and then prove. The review session, the review season is where that proving part of the three P's comes into play. Make sure that you're showing up as your best self. You have the documentation and the data to back up what it is that you are asking for, because that is what gives your manager the ability to advocate for you behind closed doors. And for the people who are giving the reviews, understand that you have to approach them with care, right? People are already on edge because the last 18 months has been really, really stressful. So people are coming into reviews already feeling a bit apprehensive. And so handle people with care, a little extra care this year, just because it is really, really important that the people who you want to remain in your organization feel seen, feel heard, and feel valued.
All right, y'all. Now we are at our hot seat, and the employee question for today: how do you get a recruiter's attention when I'm trying to shift my career to a different path? For example, I have years of DEI leadership experience outside of my normal job duties, but because I don't do these things as part of my 9 to 5, it isn't recognized as experience. So first question is, who doesn't recognize it as experience, right? There are parts of your resume where you put your job experience, but you also have the ability to put other leadership things that you've done, right? So for me, I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta. My leadership experience within Delta is on my resume, right? Because I co-chair a committee. Also, if you are trying to switch industries, what you need to focus on are your transferable skills. What did you do as a DEI leader, right, that is also valuable to whatever new industry it is that you're trying to get to? Again, your job is to build a bridge between where you sit and the role that the hiring manager is supposed to be hiring for. You want, when they look at your career tools, for them to think, hey, obviously this person belongs here. Yes, this person could do this job. It's a no-brainer. When I present them as a candidate to the higher ups, they're going to have no problems with me bringing them into the role, because they understand that based on skill set and competencies and the story that you've been able to tell about your career, that you can actually do the job. So focus on the bridge between where you are and where that hiring manager is, and then you tell the story that makes it make sense that you would sit in that seat. Our manager question for today's hot seat: I fought really hard to get my current position, and now that I'm in it, I'm not sure that it was worth the fight. I still feel like I have no authority, just a lot more work and responsibility. Any advice? One, I'm so sorry that you're feeling like this. I feel like it is a common thing that I hear from people of color, from Black people, from Black women who take on roles. And so there are other people who are trying to navigate this space as well. And so I hope you don't feel alone in this fight. The second thing that I would say is have a conversation with your boss around the expectations that you had when you took on the role, the reality of what your role is right now, and then lastly, what you hope to see change. And if you have some tangible things that you would like, I would make the ask in that meeting and get a sense of if it's realistic for those things to happen or if not. If it's not realistic, you have to make a decision on if this is where you want to be professionally, right? There's no point in being a figurehead, especially if you are someone who actually cares about the work. You are someone who wants to push the needle. You are someone who wants to make change in whatever capacity you are within an organization. And so the person who has the ability to give you any visibility into that is a person you report to, right? And so I would go in and have a really honest conversation around what you agreed upon when you took the role and what you thought your role day-to-day would encompass, what the reality of working in your title is, have some very concrete examples, not just your feelings, around how what you're doing is actually different than what you thought, and then have some very specific and direct asks and figure out if it is a possibility for those things to then become part of your core responsibilities. Once you have an answer, you can make an informed decision on if you want to move forward or not. All right, y'all, you know I like to end every single episode with an affirmation to get you through the week. And as always, I'm using the I Choose a Ladder affirmation cards. If you do not have your set yet, head on over to choosealadder.com and get a set of these cards to help you get through every single day. The word for today is, what is meant for me is mine. What is meant for me is mine. And this is something that I've been reminding myself when I feel like I'm moving too slow, when I feel like I'm not where I thought I would be by this age, by this phase, by this whatever, that what is meant for me is mine. And nothing that is meant to be a part of my life will pass me by. And I have utter faith in that. And hopefully you also believe that for yourself, regardless of if you are exactly where you thought you would be, if you are years behind where you thought you would be, or if you have no idea where you currently are and you're trying to figure it out. What is meant for you is yours. As always, if you want to keep the conversation going, you can connect with me on Instagram at ICUWatching. And until next time, thank you for watching. Meeting adjourned.